Hello, everyone. My name is Fiona, and today I'm going to share my project on Seattle's Filipino cannery workers and the Asian American movement. My goal is to connect their past to today's community so we can use their strategies to guide our own organizing. So, who am I? I'm a Filipino American raised in Mill Creek. I chose these movements because I wanted to understand how activists fought for rights that I have today. So, why did I pick St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Catholic Church members as my audience? Well, I grew up attending this parish. I know that as Christians, we love and support each other. With that support, I believe we can grow stronger as a community, and I hope to inspire you to take action. Before we start, I want to be clear. I'm not part of the original Filipino cannery workers or Seattle's Asian American movement. I'm following the beautiful trouble principle, follow the lead of the most impacted. My role is to not speak for these communities, but to learn from them and highlight their voices and strategies. The purpose of my presentation is to connect history, community, and action. Through my analysis, I want to bring unity and visibility to our community so we can start action. Here's a timeline of important events from both movements. As you can see, the Filipino cannery workers movement came first, but it's important to see that Filipinos were also part of the Asian American movement. This shows how the later movement built on what came before. These are the core theories I used to analyze the movements. Target agent looks at who has power and who is oppressed. Intersectionality shows how race, class, and gender overlap and affect oppression. Cultural hegemony refers to how the dominant group's culture naturally becomes the norm, and Collins domains show how oppression is maintained through different structures. All of these help us analyze oppression and power and how change is resisted or created. Starting with the Filipino cannery workers, in the 19,000s, thousands of young Filipino men called alascaros came to Seattle. In the summers, they worked in salmon canneries in Alaska. In the winters, they lived in Seattle's International District. They faced racism, poor housing, and really tough working conditions. Now, let's analyze the different events within this movement, in which using shapes, I showed the application of the different course theories. So, in 1933, Filipino workers created the Cannery Workers and Farm Laborers Union, the first Filipino-led union in the U.S. They challenged the target agent theory because immigrants who were targets of exploitation by white contractors fought back for proper wages and living conditions. They also resisted cultural hegemony because, as Filipino workers were expected to accept the poor conditions, they instead stood up for themselves. In 1936, two union leaders, Virgil Duyunagan and Aurelio Simon, were assassinated. Assassinations maintained systems of power through the structural structure of removing movement leaders, the disciplinary structure of disciplining activists through fear, and the interpersonal structure of spreading fear within communities. Their murders also connected to intersectionality because they faced overlapping struggles of race, class, and immigrant status, leading to their assassination. However, their assassination did create more determination as the leaders were seen as martyrs for their union. Even after this violence, the union evolved into ILWU Local 37, which was a lasting institution for Filipino activism. This shows that the people who were once targets created their own power. In fact, Local 37 trained leaders and kept the fight alive. They even resisted cultural hegemony as they made sure Filipino voices weren't erased. This quote from Dorothy Cordova, the Filipino Youth Association 1960 co-founder, shows how powerful the Filipino community was. She explains that if there was a problem, just a few phone calls could bring out hundreds of people ready to stand up for what was right. In fact, the cannery workers' motto was, "Unity is strength." We can see that in action from 1933, when the union got its charter, to 1938, when members ratified their contract together. In each of these photos, we can see their unity as there are multiple people in each photo. With many people, it amplified voices and gave activists more power. Now let's look at the Asian American movement. This movement included the Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos, and more. In this movement, people of all ages and backgrounds were involved, including youth, elders, and children of immigrants. Together, they fought against racism, lack of representation, urban displacement, and housing inequalities. Looking at the different events within this movement, in 1971, the Oriental Student Sit-In happened at Seattle Central Community College, where Asian American students demanded representation in the administration, in which their strategy was inspired by the Black Student Union sit-ins. This event connects to the target agent theory because these excluded students challenged the institutions. This event also resisted cultural hegemony because as the school wanted to erase Asian histories, the students continued to fight for representation. In the early 1970s, Asian American activists in Seattle protested the Kingdom Project and marched on HUD to demand for compensation and fought against redevelopment near the neighborhoods. Using Collins' domains of power, we can see how the economic domain, the displacement caused by development, and the structural domain, the housing policies, worked against the communities, continuing oppression on them. Continuing this, in the mid 1970s, the International District Preservation Movement worked to protect housing and services, especially for the elderly residents. They even created an 8-point program, which was the community's demands, and built coalitions across communities to build their support. This event showed intersectionality because many of the oppressed residents were immigrants and elderly, increasing their oppression. This event also showed cultural hegemony as the dominant power, the government, prioritized business and construction over the people. This quote from Larry Matsuda, an Asian American student movement activist, shows how important coalitions were to the Seattle Asian American movement, and how he explained that Asian Americans joined with Black and Mexican American activists to build their voice, support, and community. In fact, Mike Tagawa, an Oriental student sit-in leader, once said during the sit-in, "The time of the quiet Asian has passed." This saying expressed how the Asian Americans were ready to speak up and take action. You can also see this readiness in the flyers they made to advertise protests and events, as they were very detailed and bold. Now let's use beautiful troubled tools to analyze the different strategies these movements used. By doing this, we can apply their effective strategies to our current community organizing. The tools I'll focus on are mastery action, when big groups gather in public, creative disruption, where activists interrupt to gain attention, make the invisible visible, which exposes hidden injustices, and Baraza, which means large community meetings to plan next steps. For mastery action, just look at the photos. You can see how each movement has many attendees. With these large numbers, it gave them more power, such as how in the CWFLU, the large participation helped ratify the 1938 contract. For creative disruption, one example is the Kingdom protest, where activists threw mud on the stage to disrupt speeches. Another was the International District March, where they sang and clapped at Spellman's office for an hour. These disruptions gave these activists power and put pressure on officials. Make the invisible visible shows in how workers and activists exposed what was hidden. Some ways that they did this was through publishing articles in newspapers or holding large banners for everyone to see. The outcome of this principle led to Filipino cannery workers showing the world their harsh conditions, and the Asian American activists highlighting the need for services and funding in the international district. By making these things public, it grew their community and support. Baraza was also another important tool utilized in these movements. For example, CWFLU leaders held community meetings where leaders were accountable and strategies were planned. Another example is how, after the first Kingdom protest, activists met at St. Peter Claver Center to plan their next steps, which led to another march 2 weeks later. So, what did this show all of us? It shows us that success came from community involvement, such as protests, sit ins, campaigns, and discussions. Today, groups like OCA Greater Seattle and SCIDpda continue these movements. Specifically, OCA fights for Asian American rights and against hate crimes, while SCIDpda works to preserve affordable housing and services in the International District. So, what can you do? You can support these groups with funding and volunteering. For example, you can join anti hate rallies with the OCA or speak out at city meetings like the Sound Transit Board meeting with them. You can also support SCIDpda by helping publish research or by engaging in their community planning meetings. But remember, these tools are also available for us, our church, to use. For example, we could hold a Baraza during our Sunday morning donuts to plan what steps to take next. Then, our church can even organize a peaceful rally against injustice on Bothville Highway, which is a busy nearby street. We could also share this presentation with other churches to further expose injustices and grow our community. In conclusion, I want to remind you that your voice, like those of Seattle Filipino Cannery workers and Asian American movement, has the power to inspire and challenge injustices. So consider, how might you make a difference? Remember, every voice counts. Thank you. And here are links to more resources if you'd like to learn more. And please complete the Google form. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you.